America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. We got some breaking news. President Biden meeting with the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. This is on the tail end of an otherwise embarrassing trip to Europe for our president. We had the G7 conference, and you've seen clips of him bumbling his way through everything. Then there was a NATO meeting, some EU-US meeting, and then ending with this summit with Putin. For some reason, Biden's handlers thought this was going to be a good idea. I don't know what most Americans' impressions are of Putin. I don't know what most people think of. He's the dictator of Russia. That's a big deal. Some pretty tough cats in Russia. Think of how evil a man would need to be. And think of the evil things. Let me word it like this. How the evil things that a man would need to do to be the president of Russia since 2000. 21 years. Well, he was the president, then he was the prime minister for a while. Now he's named himself the president again. There were elections. He won 77% of the vote. So the people love him. They just love him. He's an evil person. You'd have to be, right? But he plays it coy. That's the deal. He plays it nice and coy. So I think he tricks a lot of people. This is an NBC interview done the other day with Putin. I think the question's in the beginning of this, but if not, he's asked, hey, Putin, does Russia agents have anything to do with the hacking of our meat supply chain and the oil pipeline in the Southeast? And of course, he didn't say no. He said this.
Where is the evidence? Where is proof? It's becoming farcical. We know it well. We have been accused of all kinds of things, election interference, cyber attacks, and so on and so forth. And not one time did they bother to produce any kind of evidence or proof, just unfounded accusations.
What? Notice he didn't say no. And then this gem, a nice little shot at our president. Which is coming any moment now. Or I can just tell you what he said. All right, so the guy, I'll just tell you. The NBC reporter's like, hey, last time Joe Biden met with you, he said he got right up in your face, nose to nose, and said, I know the kind of person you are. I can see your soul. And Putin said something back, takes one to know one, or something like that. And he goes, did this happen? And Putin goes, I don't know. I don't remember that, but I'm sure Joe Biden has a good memory. Maybe one day we'll find out what really happened behind the cameras, but our guy can barely put sentences together anymore, so I'm sure it didn't go too well. Our friend John Phillips is here, KABC radio host, writer at the Orange County Register. John, long time no talk, brother. How are you?
Good to see you.
And good to talk to you as well. All right, what do you make of it, and just really how our president's done the last week or so on his first big international stage?
Well, after watching that clip of Putin on NBC, I think Kamala is envious that his interview went so much better than hers. So there's that. Materially speaking, it's funny. Trump was always portrayed as this stooge of Russia, and Biden and the Democrats were going to be the ones that stepped in and really put the screws to him. Materially speaking, so far, Trump was much harder on Russia than Biden's being. Rick Grinnell, who is the ambassador to Germany, is a friend of mine, and he told me that when he was sent to Germany by President Trump, he was given 3 tasks as ambassador. One was to return the Nazis that were still alive in the United States back to Germany. The second thing that he was supposed to do is make sure that Germany paid their NATO bills. And the third thing was to prevent that oil pipeline going from Russia to Germany. The Germans wanted it because they wanted cheap Russian oil. The Russians wanted it because they wanted to sell oil. But we didn't want it because we didn't want Germany dependent on Russian oil, because when you're dependent on their oil, you're dependent on them. And that's exactly what Rick Grinnell did. Now that Biden's in office, what's going on? The oil is flowing. Well, materially speaking, that's exactly what the Russians wanted, and it's what is not in America's interest. But because of the framing of the media, where they're portraying him as this James Bond type of character, where he's got, Putin's reflection on his sunglasses on the cover of Time magazine, they're making it seem, regardless of what actually happens, that he's going there and he's really going to let him have it when the opposite is true so far.
Really interesting. And that was always one of the weirdest plays from the media, that Trump was ranging from a Russian spy, like a Russian agent, to a Russian stooge, when you just looked at his policies of what he did and things that Russia did not want. Like, that made the least sense out of all the accusations, I would say, against Trump, compared to Biden's posture. So let's talk about like this idea of strength, right? Again, Trump is always the tough guy, right? When he goes to the G7, when he went, he like pushed himself to the front of the line, right? So he'd be the man, and now Biden's in the back of everything all the time, leading from behind, kind of thing. How much weight do you put on these power dynamics of geopolitics?
My favorite story about Trump at the G7 just showed up in the Washington Post, where he apparently threw Starburst candy at Angela Merkel, which she seems more like a Snickers girl to me. But anyway, that happened. No, this is a story of media framing. It's almost like the old school Hollywood, system, where they would put out whatever narrative they wanted to put out. Where that Rock Hudson, boy, he really is a ladies' man, because they thought that would help sell tickets. The media is framing this the same way. They're taking what exists, which is essentially a less strict version of what Trump was doing, but they're making it seem like he is James Bond over there, just telling everyone what for. And the public's buying it. And it's almost like the kids in cages. When President Trump was in office, oh my God, the kids in cages is a humanitarian crisis. How can this ever happen? It was on the news every night. Now that Biden's in office, the kids are still in cages, and it's almost like it's not even happening. So, this is the media doing him a solid with how they're portraying what's going on over there.
We mentioned this already. I want to know if there's any other play that Russia has, right? We know China believes, and I'm curious your take here too, but my understanding is China wants total world domination. They want to control the internet. They want to control the Belt and Road Initiative, infrastructure all around the world, Europe, Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. They want to control, Huawei, all the infrastructure, like cell towers around the world. Like, they're full on world domination. Does Russia want that? / what do they want? What's their big vision and play for the future?
Well, they're fighting for relevancy because they have a declining population. They have an aging population. They're used to being one of the big power players on the global stage. Now they're almost irrelevant, with the exception of whenever they insert themselves into some sort of conflict. And it really is a bruise to their ego. It's a blow to their ego. They want to be back at the big kids table. They don't want to be thought of as being a country that used to be something. So my guess is they'll continue to do what they're doing, which is inserting themselves into dramatic situations all over the place. But, right now it's the United States and China that are the two big dogs.
So would you agree with, I guess it's old news, right? But Mitt Romney's there, our biggest geopolitical threat, or, you have Obama like, oh, the 80s called and they want our foreign policy back. Where do you put them when it comes to a real life threat?
Well, I think right now it's not in dispute that China is the biggest geopolitical threat to the world. I mean, we have a pandemic thanks to them. And they certainly, at an absolute minimum, were honest with us about what they knew and when they knew it, so that we could react accordingly. It played to the Democrats' political interest to portray Russia as that, but in reality, China's the problem right now.
What's our play? Like, what's our vision, Biden's vision for America on the world stage, and what would he like to get out of this meeting?
Well, I think he wants to portray himself as being a guy who's in charge, that he has all of his mental faculties, that he is bringing America back to the international community, where Trump was this big, boorish guy who was pushing people around and throwing candy. And I'm showing up, and I'm going to be the seasoned diplomat, and I'm going to be the guy who can operate in a room with other heads of state, and they'll walk away respecting me. And that's not what's happening. If you look at the international papers, if you look at how the globe is seeing this, they're seeing Joe Biden really up close and personal for the first time, and they're shocked at how much this man has lost it. We can paper over it here in the United States because the press is friendly. The international press doesn't care. They don't care about whatever domestically is going on over here, and they are absolutely shocked at his condition.
what do we do with that as conservatives? Because, right, obviously that was done a lot with Trump too, right? He's crazy, he's senile, we can't let him have the nuclear codes. And I think ultimately there was a Yale psychologist who was like disbarred, or whatever the technical term is, for her like, what's the word, like practicing or medicine on the air without a patient, like a real patient relationship. Anyway, they did that with Trump. And I don't want to question, / how does a conservative question his mental faculties without being like, oh, you're just, this is just your partisanship. It's like, no, I'm actually like, this is not good for America. How do we do that?
You have to be very careful, because the public will not look at it kindly if they think we're beating up on an invalid. A friend of mine is a political science professor here in California. And there was a guy who got elected to the California state legislature who was truly stupid. His first speech before the assembly was written for him by his aides on cue cards, and he wasn't paying attention. And he read the speech the first time, and then he just continued from the very beginning, from the introduction, and started to read it again because he didn't know. And eventually the speaker cut him off, and he was known in Sacramento as being the dumbest man alive ever to be elected to office. And so she told the story to her students, and they didn't believe her. So she said, all right, if you want to meet a truly stupid person who managed to get elected to office, I will have him come speak to the class. And he came and spoke to the class. And after he left, they all turned on her. How could you be so mean to this poor man? He's so nice. How could you beat up on him for doing what he did up in Sacramento? And it flipped, the script got flipped from being this guy who was not mentally capable of writing laws that the rest of us have to live by to you're beating up on a poor man. And that's what we have to be careful with Biden.
Wow. That's awesome. Terrible. But then my theory is that it'll be that or that. And then one day, boom, like everyone turns. All the Democrats, the whole party leadership, everyone turns on him. They throw him out the back door like he never existed and Kamala's president. We all celebrate it. And we're going to be gaslit into saying, oh, well, this is what the people wanted anyway. They really voted for Kamala, not for Joe. Right? So do you think they'll turn fast one day, or is they going to try to hold him up weekend at Bernie's for 4 years?
The minute it becomes politically expedient for them, they will push him in his grave and start shoveling the dirt. If you want to know what they honestly think, go back and look at what they were saying in the early days of the primary when none of them wanted Joe Biden to be the nominee. They were all saying what we are saying now. They all recognized his cognitive decline, and it wasn't particularly controversial.
Last question for you, to go back to Russia. All the hacking, the oil pipeline, and then our meat infrastructure. Is Russia involved / what do we do about this? Because it's going to turn into power and water and all the other vitals soon.
Yeah, I assume that they are involved in situations like this, and I expect that they're going to be involved in future situations that are similar to it. They are no longer the global superpower that they used to be, so they're looking for these guerrilla tactics to make themselves relevant and to kick up some dirt. So if we have to go into it with the assumption that this is just how Russia's going to behave, but the Russians aren't the only ones. I assume that the Chinese are up to similar tactics, and the Iranians and other people. So we just have to be very good at protecting our national security interests. We have to be very good at protecting our technology, because there are bad actors that are always trying to screw things up.
Yeah, you're right. It's the new guerrilla warfare. John Phillips, KABC, Orange County Register. John, always good to talk to you, man.
Thanks for having me. Likewise.
Really appreciate you. All right, coming up next, I want to talk about critical race theory, and then we're going to talk to someone who's fighting against it in the schools and doing an awesome job. Been doing it for a long time. And I want to talk about the three groups of people who appeal, excuse me, let me word it like this. Critical race theory and social justice appeals to three groups of people: the suckers, the narcissists, and the grifters. We'll talk all about that, but I got one more minute. Let me show you this last Putin story here. It's one of my favorite Putin stories. It's all you need to know about Putin and power games. Angela Merkel met with Putin years ago. Angela Merkel, the head of Germany, she hates dogs. She was bit by a dog a long, long time ago, and she hates dogs. Putin found out about this. And in the middle of one of their press conference meetings, they're both sitting down in chairs, and the journalists are there, the whole thing. Two giant black labs come bounding into the room, and Putin's like, oh, Oh, Flopsy and Mopsy, what are you guys doing here? Oh, good, Angela. Oh, I'm sorry about this, Angela. That's embarrassing. They're very friendly, Angela, very friendly. And Merkel is like this, trying not to scream and jump on top of the chairs. And Putin literally afterwards, he said, oh, when I found out that she didn't like dogs, of course I apologized. There's no telling what games Putin played on our president, behind the scenes and maybe still to come in front of him. The safest play, or the most obvious play, is for natural disaster, right? You want to prepare for a natural disaster. The smart play is now to be prepared for, as John was just talking about, Russian hacks. Right? We've had them on our oil supply, our meat supply. Like I said, water and power is certainly next. That's the guerrilla warfare. That's modern warfare, and that's what it's going to look like for a long time. It's going to take down our infrastructure chains. And we saw how COVID can shut everything down and how people freak out and panic afterwards. MyPatriotSupply.com. Obviously, it's the food, no brainer, but it's more than that. Solar chargers, fire starters, water filtration systems, radios. Just go to their website, spend some money, and you're set for life. The food's good for 25 years, right? So everyone else out there, they're laughing, and they're going to be laughing themselves all the way to the food bank or all the way to the National Guard begging for their rations when something like this hits again. Preparewiththefirst.com. We have a special website for you. 25% off their 4-week emergency food supply. Just check it off the list. Get it now. Preparewiththefirst.com. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusader. So we know all about critical race theory and social justice by now. It's everywhere, but if you've been watching the show for 10 minutes, then you know all about it as well. So the question now is, who does this appeal to? Right? Like, we know what it is, and I hear it and I'm like, well, who likes this? So I've narrowed it down to 3 groups. You got your suckers, your narcissists, and your grifters. Let's go through each of them. A couple years ago, Pastor John MacArthur, one of my favorite pastors, he said that critical race theory and social justice is more dangerous than any other controversy that he's ever faced, and maybe the most dangerous thing that has faced the church in the last 100 years. It's a couple years ago he said that. And just a couple weeks ago, he was asked if he stands by that statement. And he said, oh yeah, no question about it. This is a big deal, critical race theory and social justice. So who's behind this? Who are the people who are moving this forward? First, you got the suckers. Noam Chomsky, he said, that's the whole point of good propaganda. You want to create a slogan that nobody's going to be against and everybody's going to be for. And nobody knows what it means because it doesn't mean anything. You want to know maybe the best slogan ever, the best propaganda slogan ever? Black Lives Matter. Who's going to be against that? What are you going to say? They don't matter, right? And that's what Noam Chomsky was talking about. I mean, he wrote that decades ago, but that's the type of thing he was talking about. It's perfect. Social justice. Who's against justice? So many people fall for the propaganda right from the jump because no one wants to be called a racist. The second group, the narcissists. Right? The appeal of critical race theory and social justice and all this madness. The appeal for the average person, this is the biggest group of people I would say, is our culture today that says, I'm not responsible for what I've become. People don't want to take responsibility. We have no personal responsibility left. And this is the next stage of that. I'm not responsible for who I've become and what I've become. You are. You. The patriarchal, cisgendered, heteronormative system, right? It's not even a specific person, it's just these systems have built this culture that has made me what I am which I don't like. And I'm not going to take responsibility for who I am and who I become, because nothing's my fault. So it's your fault. And someone says, well, whose fault? The systems, right? So the solution isn't to change things. If you're one of these narcissists, your solution isn't to change things. Personally, certainly it's not to change yourself, because I'm perfect and nothing's my fault. Also, you can't change things on the margins, because if you still change things on the margins, the systems are still in place. So we need to burn it down to the ground. That's their approach. That way I will feel better. I will have achieved my vengeance, and you will have received what you're due. And that's real justice. The people who fall under this narcissistic group are the narcissist and mentally unwell. All right? It's the person who doesn't like their life. They've made bad choices. They're depressed. They have anxiety for any number of countless reasons. And instead of taking any personal responsibility to fix themselves and make good decisions, it's way easier to blame a nameless, faceless force or system in society for my problems, right? So, who does social justice and critical race theory appeal to? The suckers? I'm not racist. The narcissist, nothing's my fault. And then the third group are the grifters. The grifters just want money. Right? You always follow the money. Michael Brown's dad has come out, and he's joined a group of other people as well of this type who have come out against Black Lives Matter, specifically Patrisse Cullors, after she just bought her fourth property, the latest in Malibu. This group, Black Lives Matter, they have no transparency as to where their money's going, and these victims' families haven't been helped by Black Lives Matter at all. They're like Michael Brown's son has been used for fundraising efforts and for rallies and stuff, but they haven't received any money themselves for funeral expenses or anything else. So you have grifters who are running the show. The suckers, the narcissists, and the grifters. Now, there's some overlap in those last two groups between the narcissists and the grifters. There's a new book, it's called The New Science of Narcissism, Understanding One of the Greatest Psychological Challenges of Our Time. And the author talks about two types of narcissists. And I want to go over those quickly here. First, you have the grandiose narcissist. These people are ambitious, driven, charming, high self-esteem, feel really good about themselves, right? These are the narcissists who you work for, you date, you're entertained by. And we are often drawn to their boldness, but then later repelled by their self-centeredness and lack of empathy. That's the grifters. The grifters fall in that group. These are the people who are out front, right? The narcissistic leaders who are rallying the mob, raising the money, grabbing the microphone, screaming into the megaphone, going on TV, right? They're the grandiose narcissists. The second group of narcissists are the vulnerable narcissists. These are people who are introverted, depressed, easily hurt by criticism, low self-esteem, and see themselves as deserving of special treatment. So you have these two groups of narcissists, and it's very simple to see, I think, right? You have the grandiose narcissists are speaking to the vulnerable narcissists, which are a very easily led group of people because they think they're the center of the universe and are deserving of special treatment. So when someone comes in, a grandiose narcissist, a grifter, who thinks they're the center of the universe and tells these people that they're the center of the universe and everything's working against you and you deserve special treatment, this is a very symbiotic relationship. And they're all easily led, right? It's a mental disorder. Booker T. Washington, he said, 1911, he said, "I'm afraid there's a certain class of race problem solvers who don't want the patient to get well, because as long as the disease holds out, they have not only an easy means of making a living, but also an easy medium through which to make themselves prominent before the public." That would be the grifters there, right? The grandiose narcissists. So why does this matter? Well, you got to be aware of who you're talking to. Right? So when you're trying to debunk or spread the word about critical race theory and social justice, who are you talking to? Are you talking to a sucker? Because if you're talking to a sucker, you just got to let them know that they're not racist. So it's pretty simple. Like alleviate them of their original sin of whiteness. Tell them not to be shamed by a bunch of narcissists, right? So you approach the sucker a different way. If you're talking to a narcissist, right? Well, get to the root of why they find social justice and critical race theory so appealing, right? Help them with their life, love them, right? Let them see that they can make different choices. They can improve their life on their own. It's not systems to blame. You can overcome this, right? It's an empowering message that we used to have in America, but we don't have anymore because the grifters are teaching victimhood. If you're talking to the grifters, tell them to, well, enjoy their money while it lasts because we're on to them. And this game can't last forever once we get more people to see what critical race theory is and what social justice is really all about. Coming up next, we're going to talk to a woman who's been fighting this since 2009 in our schools. She's not new to the party. She's been there from the beginning. We'll talk with her coming up next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I will always gladly, happily highlight and celebrate people who are on the ground fighting against critical race theory, if for no other reason, to encourage them and to encourage the rest of us to step up and join that fight as well. And I want to talk to our next guest who's been in the fight for a long time and has seen it evolve from something ugly into something uglier. A former teacher in Queens and now chair of the Jewish Vote GOP, Cindy Gross. Ms. Gross, how are you, ma'am?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to talk to you. So again, you've been fighting this really since 2009 or so. What type of corruption have you seen in the New York City school district? Yep.
Even longer. I worked in a school system in Queens, predominantly a minority student body and a minority staff. And I saw many things that violated the chancellor's regulations that basically were against safety, mandated reporting issues, social services that are mandated by state and federal law, racist and inaccurate facts taught in classrooms. And I was promised whistleblower retaliation, and instead they retaliated against me. They broke my confidentiality, which is against the law. And coincidentally, the New York Post today, their head story is about the Black parents revolting against my school and the superintendent who was in charge then. And only now people are talking about it. For years, nobody wanted to discuss this. Nobody in the media, even when I ran for Congress, even working on the National Diversity Coalition for Donald Trump.
Literally, you're right. The headline of the New York Post is Black families in Queens revolt. Schools failed us. And you were the one back in mid-2000s trying to blow the whistle on this. Would you say, for the most part, the school district leaders are inept or corrupt?
Well, in 2006, there was an email going through that school district among the minority staff members that called white women docile and easy. I immediately sent it directly to Randy Weingarten, who was then the president of the United Federation of Teachers, now is the American Federation of Teachers union leader, who has been for over a year the leader of keeping school closed and talking about every kind of issue but supporting our students into quality education. And when I sent this to her, her remark to me was, seen this before many times. And where did I get this? They had no interest in trying to solve a problem, whether or not it was the mandated reporting issues, whether or not it was hiding weapons. My principal slapped a student on their bottom. I reported it. The student actually came out and testified against the principal, but I was blamed for it. I exposed in the school, the very school that's named in the New York Post article today, a nonprofit organization that was running out of the school. After they retaliated against me over a year later, the person who I whistleblew about and that organization was found guilty of embezzlement and stealing money from the nonprofit. This has been going on for years. But
they're the absolute worst. Where would you, so you saw just corruption and just the worst, but now it's a double down because now we got critical race theory. So what do you think is the most egregious critical race theory teaching that you've seen and heard, and what are we doing to fight it?
So I am a known Jewish activist, and I have seen for many years the anti-Semitism in schools. There was an issue where we were at a staff meeting and we were told that it's because of the Jewish holidays we can't get math and reading lessons started on time. I was retaliated against in so many ways because I am a proud Jew. I will tell you that I have now a load of information from other teachers. There's a handout that was given out that to students that said African Americans came to America for compensation and better lives, and we all know that's not true. And also, elementary school handout that teaches that Ramses II is a person to be honored by the Black community. Ramses II was the person who enslaved Jews. By the same token, the principal in my school, who actually stole money from HUD, a government agency, was allowed to come back, wrote on his school calendar, CP time is not accepted here, and got a slap on her hand from the superintendent, who the New York Post article actually points out was later arrested for sexual misconduct. If I, as a white woman, would have wrote that on any kind of lesson, I would have been on CNN, a headshot with the Daily News, demanding all kinds of lawsuits against me. This person was allowed to keep a job after that. So it's from all ages, all ranges of levels of backgrounds. But I'm very happy to see that finally something is being, discussed about it, because for so many years, no one wanted to talk to me.
I got one last question for you, just to bring really all of this together. The other day, the LA Teachers Union voted on a resolution or whatever, calling out Israel and saying Israel's an apartheid state and we got to support the Palestinians and, divest from Israel and all this absolute anti-Semitic garbage. So there's that. And then there's also, why is the teachers union even involved in that at all? But I think that gets to the root of everything you're talking about here with the anti-Semitism out of this leadership. Where does this come from, and why is there so much anti-Semitism in the teachers union?
Yes, there is. There was a professional development in 2005 or 6, I believe, out of the Bronx that was supposed to be about a history of the 5 boroughs, and it came out that it was run by a Muslim who was talking about Jews owning all the money. There's been staff issues. I'm a very big Donald Trump supporter. I think he did a lot of great things, and I hope that in 2022, he actually, whatever he plans to do, make sure he fulfills the promise he did in 2015 to actually eliminate the Department of Education power altogether or diminish it, because our tax dollars are going to this. And you say LA, it's been brought up in Boston already. And yesterday in New York, there was a U of T plan rally about how to teach Palestine in textbooks and in classrooms. So this, it used to be Common Core, globalism. They just changed the names of it. The effects of COVID and parents becoming a little more aware of the failures of schools and getting back to school is making this the topic now.
Cindy Gross, Jewish Vote, GOP. Cindy, great to talk to you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. Coming up next, I want to talk about, it's funny, we talk about where we're going. If we continue down this path, where are we going to end up? Well, there was a person who grew up in North Korea who's been living in America for a while. And she's like, no, you're already there. We'll tell her story. Coming up next, True Story. Mike Slater, spread the word. So far this week, we've talked about a doctor who used to practice in the Soviet Union. We talked about someone who grew up in China's communist revolution or cultural revolution under Mao. And both those people saying, hello, I've seen this movie before, Americans. Not good. Stop going down this path. I want to share another story with you. Yeonmi Park. She escaped North Korea and then ultimately ended up at Columbia University. Imagine that experience, right? You're growing up in the most repressive state in the world, and then you're living in the lap of luxury at an Ivy League school, eating at an all-you-can-eat buffet at a dining hall 3 times a day, right? Like, that's unbelievable. So she was 13. She fled with her mom into China. She hiked over a frozen river. She was captured by human traffickers who sold them into slavery. She was sold for $300. Her mom was sold for $100. Some Christian missionaries in China helped her flee to Mongolia, hiking across the Gobi Desert. What? And then she got in Mongolia, made it to South Korea, and then ultimately to Columbia University. Amazing. Could you imagine her in the Gobi Desert near death? There's no way she could even think that, like, one day I'll be studying at an Ivy League school in New York City. Like, there's no way that thought could ever cross her mind. Anyway, she's graduated. And imagine hiking across that. Like, what do you... So she graduated, and now she's speaking out. She said, I expected that I was paying this fortune to go to Columbia. It's like 65 grand a year. All this time and energy to learn how to think. But they are forcing you to think the way they want you to think. I realized, wow, this is insane. I thought America was different. But I saw, are you ready? So many similarities to what I saw in North Korea that I started worrying. Uh-oh. She said the similarities were collective guilt, political correctness, to say the least, and hating America. And she said she saw these red flags as soon as she arrived during orientation. She said she told some staff member that she liked Jane Austen books. And this staff member said, oh, don't you know that they were written by a colonial mindset? And they're racist and bigots and they're subconsciously brainwashing you? And she's like, wait, what are you talking about? She says it's chaos. She said her time at Columbia, she said it felt like the regression in civilization. Actual quote, even North Korea is not this nuts. Are you listening? North Korea was pretty crazy, not this crazy. So what did she do? Well, she learned to shut up, say what she needed to say in order to get good grades and graduate. And that's the same thing that you got to do when you're in North Korea. Now, yes, there's no risk of death in Columbia, or if you say the wrong thing, you are sent to a gulag. But your reputation is destroyed. Your potential livelihood can be destroyed if you say the wrong thing. The process is still the same. Either way, you don't say what you think. And if you do that for long enough, where you don't say what you think and you just follow the party line to get along, to go along, then ultimately, real quickly, you turn your brain off. And when you turn your brain off for long enough, then you turn your soul off. And it's all to get along, whether it's to get along to get that grade or get that paycheck or to not have your family sent to a prison camp. Either way, you're not thinking anymore. And then are you even a human, really? She said, universities strip people's ability to think critically. And her example of that was, she says in North Korea, she believed that Kim Jong-un was starving, right? As like solidarity with the people of North Korea. And she said, what was I thinking? He's the fattest guy. How can anyone believe that he's starving? And she said one day someone showed her a photo of Kim Jong-un and said, look at him, he's the fattest guy. And that just clicked for her. She said, oh my God, why did I not notice that he was fat? Because I never learned how to think critically. That's an amazing story. She was looking at this fat guy, but saw him as starving. Her own eyes, she could see it, but she couldn't see it. That's how brainwashed she was. She says people see things, but they've completely lost the ability to think critically. It's amazing that you can see something in front of you so clear, but it just doesn't connect until someone makes that connection for you. North Koreans, she says, don't have the internet. We don't have access to any of these great thinkers. We don't know anything. But here in America, while having everything, people choose to be brainwashed. Wow. People choose to be brainwashed. She said there's no rule of law, no morality, nothing is good or bad anymore. It's complete chaos. But I guess that's what they want, to destroy every single thing and rebuild into a communist paradise. How bad is the state of our country when someone from North Korea is like, you know what? Not much better here. In many ways. Yeah, you guys got a lot of food. Okay, no one's starving to death. But man, you guys are just as brainwashed as the North Koreans. Let me give you an example of this brainwashing. June 12th, so what was that, Saturday or so, was the 5th anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando. Do you remember this? Omar Mateen was the terrorist. He killed 49 people, injured 53 more. It was a gay club in Orlando. And it was framed by the media as this massive hate crime against gay people. And it's still being held up this way. Here's a bunch of senators the other day saying that this was an attack on the LGBTQ plus community. All right? So they're still pitching that same narrative. But it's not true. Omar Mateen did not target this club because it was a gay club. He didn't even know it was a gay club. And he never once mentioned anything about it being a gay club. 3 hours. He was in there for 3 hours before the SWAT team finally killed him, and he was on 911. And he said he did it because we were bombing countries in the Middle East. He never once, in 3 hours of this, never once said anything about gay people. No one inside the club ever overheard him say anything against gay people. He never posted any anti-gay anything on his Facebook page. 500 interviews with the FBI. No proof of any anti-gay bias whatsoever. His first plan was to attack a Disney property, like downtown Disney, but there was security there. So he Googled Orlando clubs, and Pulse was the first one to show up. He didn't Google Orlando gay clubs, or gay nightclubs, or gay bars. He just Googled Orlando clubs, and Pulse popped up, and that's where he went. This is very similar to the lab leak, right? Very similar. The guy who has a direct connection, a DASEC, to the lab and has a very vested interest to make sure that no one thought it came from a lab, he was fast right out of the gate and said, if you question this, you're a racist. Same thing with this writer back in USA Today, back in 2016. Those who insist that the shooting was solely a terrorist attack erase the LGBT community from the narrative, causing only more pain by invalidating their experiences to the ordeal. So you better not say that it had nothing to do with gay people. Because if you do, then you're just as bad and you're making it worse. In other words, the truth doesn't matter. What was his motive? Doesn't matter. We've already decided. Is that brainwashing? So what do you do with that? 99% of people think that this shooting was a gay hate crime. And it wasn't. It had nothing to do with that at all. So are we much better than North Korea? No, again, of course, no gulags, no starvation. Just the brainwashing part. Are we much better? On that point, we have our special this Friday about the lab leak. We're going to talk to a scientist. We're going to talk to someone, China expert, to talk about how they're railroading our efforts to find the truth. We'll talk to a politician who's trying to get to the bottom of it and hold them accountable. Talk about brainwashing. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.